So I want to tell you the story that involves, it's the first chapter of the book. It was the first thing I knew I had to put in here. And it was kind of this, what I think is kind of the consummate, the epitomizing example of what get after means to me. And I alluded to it before. And I'm going to cry my eyes out on this one. I'm not going to be able to hold this one back. As I mentioned, I went to Ohio State and I joined Air Force ROTC. Things went really well my freshman year. I got a 3.5 GPA in my first quarter. I went to jump training. When I came back from my winter quarter, the colonel pulled me in her office and she said, "Parker, another opportunity that we all have here is to give one Air Force ROTC cadet every year a full scholarship who doesn't have one, and we want to give it to you." And that meant that starting my sophomore year, I was going to get a 3-year scholarship for $15,000 a year to attend school. They were going to give me a stipend for books. They were going to give me money if I got good grades. Going from a 2.7 GPA in high school to a 3.5 GPA in college to getting a full scholarship was something my parents were very proud of. So I'll be honest, they didn't think I could do it. So I went to free fall school, like I told you, and I came back with my basic parachutist badge. And then my sophomore year, I went to field training, or officer basic training, where I graduated in the top 20% of my flight. And then my junior year, on March 11, 2005, I was selected to go to pilot training in the world's greatest Air Force. I'll never forget that day. It was a Friday morning. It was about 8:30 in the morning. I had a class at 9:30. I woke up, my phone was in my cell phone, flip phone was on silent, and I saw that I had a voicemail when I woke up around 8:35. And I recognized the number immediately. It was from the ROTC building. So I checked the voicemail, and it was Major Bud Zinni, one of our officers, and he said, "Parker, Cadet Schaffel, good morning. I just want to let you know that we just received the results from the Aviation Selection Board and you were selected for pilot training. I'd like you to come by the detachment and sign the paperwork today." Which meant a 10-year commitment after graduating from pilot training. I'll never forget that feeling that I had, that everything I had worked for, my life's dream to be in the air like my grandfather in the Air Force, was finally going to come to fruition for 3 straight years of extremely hard work, of getting after it in every way, mentally, physically, academically. Everything I could do was all for this moment, and I went. And the first song I listened to on my old school iPod as I walked through Ohio State Business Campus was a song called "Pressure" by a band called Skindred. It's a heavy metal band. And then the lyrics of the chorus were, "We will turn it up and never down." And that's what I thought I was doing in my life. I was getting after it, I was turning it up and never down. And I went, I signed the paperwork, and my friends and I celebrated. And because I was going to pilot training, I was able to go to a summer program at Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina, about 45 minutes away from Columbia, where I was going to be in an F-16 squadron for 3 weeks, which meant that I was basically going to be able to fly planes. Not solo. But in the back seat, there was a 2-seater model that I could sit in the back. And I will never forget walking down to the flight line that first time with a guy who was a lieutenant colonel. His name was Scott Long. His call sign was Kima, because he was bald, by choice. But they still called him Kima. I know, it's a different time. We're walking down, and I have my flight bag, my gear bag, I have my helmet, I look like I'm in Top Gun, right? And I feel like it. And the staff sergeant, who was our crew chief, puts the ladder up to the back seat of the plane, and I get in. And I strap in. I'm saying, I'm in a fighter jet right now. I'm about to fly a plane. I'm about to fly one of the greatest fighter jets in the world. And we take off. And we're going. And we're flying this 4-finger mission. And we were this plane right here. So we're the command element leader of the second element. And then he banks the plane, and he says, "Parker, let's do it." And I see the G meter in the bottom right corner of the cockpit. And it starts to go up. And we're turning. It's 3.5, 3.7. He says, "How you doing?" I said, "Great, I love it. Keep going." Pulls it the other way at 5.6. And I start to feel the G suit lock down on my legs. And I'm doing this breathing mechanic that the medical folks taught us to do, so we can keep blood flowing from our heart to our brain and keep air in our lungs. And then he says, "Let's rock and roll." and he flips the plane to the side, so we're basically flying sideways, and he pulls back on the stick. The G-suit tightens intently on my legs and on my stomach, and I'm doing this kind of this breathing mechanism they teach you. And 8.4 Gs later, I came out of it, and I stuck through it. I didn't lose consciousness, I didn't throw up, I didn't do anything when I was there. We were flying around and having the best time of my life. We land. I didn't vomit, I didn't puke, I didn't throw up. A lot of people do. We get down from the plane, and the other guys would taxi next to us and park their planes over there. We all kind of huddle up as we're walking back, and I feel so cool. I'm sweating, and I've got this flight suit and this G-suit on, and I'm walking back, and I've got my gear back and my helmet, and I feel like this is it, this is alive, this is what I'm going to do. And the other pilot, this call sign Joker, walks up. Joker says to Chemo, he says, "Joker, how'd he do?" And Chemo said, "I kicked his ass up there, but he held in for every minute of it." I felt like I had made it. And then I went to a flight physical a couple weeks later to make sure that everything was good. And everything was fine, except at the very end I told him that I took a prescription cream for some dry skin I had on my nose. And the doc looked at me and said, "It's not a problem, I'll get you a waiver, it's okay." I said, "Okay." A couple days later, the Air Force came back and wanted more information. They wanted me to go see a doctor about my condition. So I went to the doctor, sent in a note, and they said, "We have 45 days to make our decision." I said, "Okay." They didn't take 45, they took 7. And at about 2:30 in the afternoon, as my fellow cadets were in our weekly leadership laboratory class, I was directed to report to Colonel Pune's office. I knocked on the door, entered the room, saluted, and sat on the same small couch in which when the first colonel told me that I was awarded the 3-year academic scholarship. The colonel sat behind a wooden desk. To my left was Major Rod Carraway, my ROTC staff officer and air science instructor. He was sitting in the same spot which a previous captain had sat a few years before. Sitting next to me on the right of the 2-seater couch was Master Sergeant Fuel, a man who helped me sign my contract paperwork, my scholarship paperwork, and my pilot selection paperwork. "Cadet Schaffel, I'm sorry to say this," Colonel Hughes said, "but the Air Force has decided, because of your skin condition, to medically disqualify you from Air Force ROTC and honorably discharge you. You will no longer, from this point on, attend leadership laboratory or physical training. You can choose to remain in Major Carraway's air science class at your discretion." My eyes widened, my vision blurred, my body rocked back and forth. Others in the room might have been speaking, but I didn't hear it. I looked down at the floor and choked back my tears, struggling to keep my emotions inside. But I couldn't much longer. I wanted to burst. I started to breathe heavily on the verge of hyperventilation. I stood up and I looked down, and then I looked at Major Carraway. His elbows were on his knees and his head was in his hands. I turned and I gave the colonel a passing gaze. As I walked out of the office, I saw Master Sergeant Fuel's face. He was crying. And it seemed as if tears had been coming down his cheeks for some time. He cried, I think, because he respected me. I walked out of the colonel's office, moving quickly through the lobby for our detachment headquarters to the stairwell. As I pushed the door open to the stairs, 2 of my best friends and fellow cadets from ROTC, Andrew Kulish and Jason Brenner, I'm still friends with today. We're about to walk inside. "Hey man, what happened?" Andrew asked me. I could only eke out a few words. "It's not good." I ran down the stairs out of the ROTC building, crossed the street, and collapsed on the first bench I could find. I bawled uncontrollably. I kept crying till I had nothing left. Everything had fallen apart a mere 50 feet from the same spot. where I celebrated my pilot training selection. A handful of words from a colonel and a hasty decision by an Air Force doctor, I lost everything for which I had worked so hard. Everything was gone. My life's dream was shattered. There was no pilot training, no commission, no Air Force, nothing. From the bench, I called my parents to tell them the news. I could barely make out the words as I began to cry again. The Air Force is discharging me, I told them through my broken, cracked voice. They knew this was possible as I told them the news the previous week. Oh my, I'm so sorry, Parker, my mom told me. I know how hard you worked for this. I just can't believe it. I couldn't believe it either. The hardest phone call to make was to the man right here, to my grandfather. The one whose footsteps I wanted to follow. The one who was going to commission me in the Air Force in a matter of months. And the one who had already bought a brand new Air Force uniform to wear to my commissioning, as retired officers were allowed to do. We were both going to be on the same stage at the same time, with both of our hands in the air, repeating the same lines and the same oath that he swore when he commissioned in 1953. I dialed, he answered. Hi, Grandpa. Those were the only words I could get out before I started crying again. Parker, are you okay? The 72-year-old man asked me. No, Grandpa, I'm not okay. The Air Force is discharging me because I have dry skin. He was silent, and I kept crying. I don't remember what he eventually said, as my wails were too loud to hear his response. I'm sorry, Grandpa, I said, as I hung up the phone. A couple weeks later, I had kind of collected myself, and I had talked with the Army ROTC program, and they said that they were willing to accept me. So I kind of got my hopes up again. And I said, okay, maybe this will be it. And the Army and I didn't work out. I'd been discharged from 2 military branches in 6 months. I'm 2 months away from graduation at this point, and I take a job as a financial advisor in the suburb of Cleveland. I like the job, but a commission job is tough. You know, really good highs and really bad lows. And some of the lows I applied to the intelligence community. I applied to the CIA. Just kind of on a whim. Why? I didn't know what intelligence was, but my grandfather had worked there. So I hoped that he would kind of follow in his footsteps again. And I made the decision to switch jobs when I got a job offer. And when I was there, I met a Navy captain a few months into the job. And he said, Parker, you know, the Navy has this thing called the Direct Commission Program. And I said, okay. He said, it's basically you take people in intelligence and other related fields and you just kind of come into the military because you have relatable experience. And I said, all right. So I decided to apply to the Navy. And when I applied, they liked me, they said, but they tabled me. So I don't know what this means. They said, well, we want to look at you later, get more experience. So when I came back from my trip to Afghanistan, my ridiculous trip, on Tuesday, October 23rd, I got a phone call. It said that the Navy was going to commission me, and that I had been accepted into the program. As you can imagine, my first call was to my grandfather. And I told him the news, and I called my parents, and I called my brother, and I called everyone. And I was really excited, but I was skeptical, obviously, because I'd already been discharged for something before. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get around this. I meet with a nurse, and she says, hey, no problem. But I get to a medical board, they see a problem. And they say, we want you to go get a medical consultation on this skin condition that we found, because they had looked up my paperwork, and I said, okay. But I learned my lesson. The first time I went to a dermatologist, Do you think I was going to a dermatologist again? No way. I was going to an internal medicine doctor. Because the Navy had asked for two things. Physical readiness, did I have any skin lesions of any kind? So I go to the family doctor. It's not in the book because I didn't want to throw him under the bus, but I'll throw him under the bus here. Dr. Ken Pollock. You've seen my grandparents, my parents, everybody. I said, hey doc, I'm trying to get in the Navy and they need a physical. So I need you to basically state my physical readiness and do I have any skin lesions of any kind? And they said, skin lesions? I said, just what they're asking. I don't know. So he puts me down, he says, I don't see any problem. I said, okay. So he writes it up in a letter and I send it in to the Navy. The Navy Medical Board comes back and they say, denied. So what do you mean, denied? I just got a letter from the doctor saying it was fine. Why would you have me go see a doctor if it was going to be an issue? And they said, we'll reconsider if you write us a rebuttal of a couple of things. So I put this rebuttal together and I basically said, you know, I don't have anything wrong with me. I don't take any medications, which is 100% a lie because I still take the same thing today. So yes, I'm lying to the Navy, but with reason, right? Honesty at that case in the Air Force got me discharged. The decision of integrity here was just get in. I knew I was going to be an officer. I knew I would be good in the military. I just had to get in. And if they wanted to find out about this condition on their own, that's their thing. I wasn't going to tell them. So I took all this paperwork and I get it together and I send it in. And I get an email one afternoon. I emailed my recruiter saying, have you heard anything? He said, no, I haven't, but I'll check. And this is the days kind of right as smartphones were coming out. I didn't have one yet. So it's not like I could go to my car after work and check my phone. So when I get home at about 4:30 from work, I pull open my laptop and I have an email from Lieutenant Brian Harper, who's my recruiter. It doesn't have any text in it, just has two documents. I open the document and it says, Parker Schaffel is medically disqualified from service. But a waiver is granted. And it said waiver code to be assigned as HCB, but I had any idea what that meant. But it meant that I was going to commission in the military. And I looked at my computer and I felt like I was going to burst. And I had all of this energy, this type of energy. And I was living in Reston at the time, and I ran out the door and I went on a run, and there was this kind of large patch of woods about a mile away from my house, and I'd run down there and I was in the middle of this clearing. And I stopped in the clearing and I just started to scream. I just started to yell whatever I could. And it was 8 years of emotion, and 8 years of trying, and 8 years of crying, and every experience I'd had that had finally come to this. It took 3 branches and 8 years to finally get to this moment, and I just lost it. I just fell on myself and I began to cry, and this time it was tears of joy. And I remember calling my grandfather to tell him the news. And he kind of gave me his kind of signature catchphrase, which is, how about that? That's pretty good. And that was it. So on August 11th, 2009, it was one of the greatest days of my life. A beautiful summer morning, the air still cool from the night before as I drove to Andrews Air Force Base, located just southeast of Washington, D.C. in Maryland, about a 45-minute drive from my home in Virginia. My grandparents, parents, and brother met me there outside the Navy Resort building. I was wearing the Navy white summer uniform, a white short-sleeve shirt, white pants, white shoes, and a white cap. I hugged my family and we walked into Lieutenant Harper's office together. My parents watched over my shoulder as I signed the paperwork for my 8-year commitment, just like they had done 6 years before when I signed the contract to join the Air Force with Master Sergeant Field. With the paperwork complete, we walked outside toward the flight line and stood in front of the flagpole. On my uniform above my left breast pocket, a piece of metal glistened in the sunlight. It was my basic parachutist badge. The one badge that no one could ever take away. I had earned it in the Air Force, and I was deserving to keep it now. On the far side of the runway, I noticed several F-16s parked and lining the taxiway, just as I remembered them from my first day at Shaw Air Force Base in 2005. I looked at my badge, I looked at the planes, and I smiled. I stood in front of the flagpole. Across from me stood my hero, my grandfather, Major Arthur Storm, United States Air Force retired. He had a smile on his face. I knew he was proud. He raised his right hand and asked me to raise mine. My family watched. I knew they were proud. My grandfather spoke and I repeated. I, Parker Jeffrey Schaffel, having been appointed an ensign in the United States Navy Reserve, do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which I am about to enter. So help me God. And after that, I didn't even miss a beat. I hugged my grandfather and began to cry. If you have a goal, don't ever stop. Don't ever quit. Don't ever give up. I had something, I wanted it, and I got it, and it was hard work and perseverance, and it was never giving up. And my grandfather and I will always have that memory, one that for several years I never thought I was going to have. Grandpa, that is one of the happiest times of my life. And I'm just glad that you were there with me.